Well, let's get started talking about Anselm's Proslogion. This is, of course, a very important classic part of the history of philosophy, medieval philosophy especially, and just philosophy in general. The ontological argument of Anselm, which is an argument that God exists, a very, very terse, very dense, very brief, how many ways can I say it? Famous argument, and it's well worth reading, and really in any liberal arts school where you're taking philosophy courses, it's something that you'll no doubt want to be familiar with. And in a class like this, the knowledge and existence, which traditionally, at least at one time, was described as a class in metaphysics, epistemology, and the problem of God, it seems to be something that we should definitely look at. But I think we have a more particular view of it, given the kind of things that we've read. And my hope is that because of the context that we've established, the sequence of readings that we've thought through, difficult readings, and the particular theme that's emerging in these readings, this theme of the possibility of inquiry, the possibility of moving from ignorance to knowledge, and the nature of argumentation, the possibility of finding out new knowledge through argument, the question of demonstration and first principles, axioms, and the criterion of truth, all these things that have been raised by Plato, Aristotle, and Sextus Empiricus, they seem to me to provide us with a particularly good context for reading Anselm's Proslogion. So let's take a look at it, and I think especially certainly I've talked this many times before, and I never sort of dwelt upon the introduction, the prologue, and the introductory first chapter of the Proslogion as having any particular significance. But I think that, again, in having read over these things recently myself and discussed them with you, certain things pop out at me as being important that I might not have noticed before. What I'm thinking of, for instance, is the first lines of the prologue. Anselm says, "After I had published, at the urging of some of my brethren, a short work as a pattern for meditation on the reason of faith, adopting the role of someone who, by reasoning silently to himself, investigates things he does not know, I began to wonder, when I considered that it is constructed out of a chaining together of many arguments, whether it might be possible to find a single argument that needed nothing but itself alone for proof, that would, by itself, be enough to show that God really exists." A lot of interesting things are contained in those opening lines, and I think that for us, again, in the context of what we've been reading, his reference to himself as someone who investigates things he does not know, that's too good to be true in a way, in terms of echoing the very wording of our translation of what Meno says, the paradox of inquiry. That is, Anselm is someone who does not know, and he's seeking to know. And of course, that we know how perilous that is to claim to go from ignorance to knowledge, to investigate the things he does not know. And of course, if we were so inclined, we could repeat Meno's objection about the coherence of that sort of thing from Plato's dialogue. That is, Anselm, if you don't know God, and you don't know who he is or what he is, how are you going to find him? How will you look for him? And even if you find him, how will you know that this is what you were looking for? That sort of question is perfectly valid to address to Anselm. And I'm sure he would accept it. And I'm sure he thinks it can be overcome. But on the other hand, there's other things that pop out at us. He says that he has published before a short work as a pattern for meditation on the reason of faith. Well, of course, this notion of faith in the Christian tradition is not something that we've been reading about. This notion of knowing something through faith is, of course, a very, very strong element of Christian theology, certainly of the theology that I'm familiar with, but utterly different from anything that we would find in Plato, Aristotle, or the ancient skepticism, I think. But this notion of faith, that is, Anselm was very clear throughout his works that he, and probably also his opponent, Gounod, are believing Christians. They believe in God, and they believe in all the things that go along with being a Catholic of the time, Christian of the time, or Christian of the time. But in some of these things they may have reason to believe, but a lot of these things they believe through faith. And so one imagines Anselm as being someone who believes in God thoroughly through faith, but now is interested in what he can discover through reason. And there is a traditional, so for instance, if you look, it's very clear and well explained, and a big part of St. Thomas Aquinas's theology, that reason and faith are complementary. I might call them reason and revelation, that there's some things that we know and can only know through revelation. That is, through God's revealing them directly to the human mind, to the human species. Things we could have never found out through the use of our reason, because they're not the kind of things that are obviously true, or that that would occur to us. One can sort of fill those in for oneself. But there are other things that might have been revealed through revelation and given as a gift of faith that can also be found out, discovered, demonstrated, and proved on the basis of reason alone. That is, like mathematics or science. That is, there may be some things about God, for instance, that we can know and prove and show to others, purely in this sort of natural use, by way of our natural use of our natural faculties of reason, perhaps sense perception, things like that. Although we'll see that Anselm's argument does not rest on sense perception, at least directly. Although one wonders, having read Aristotle, whether everything, because it depends on indemonstrable first principles, and because indemonstrable first principles supposedly emerge out of our initial sense perception of the world, whether everything is dependent on sense perception in a certain way. That's something we can talk about. So the point is, what is Anselm doing here? He's trying to prove the existence of God through reason alone, which is not to say that he thinks that our belief that God exists is totally dependent upon the success of this proof, but rather that this is something that he wants to do. Very interesting prologue, and this theme of going from ignorance to knowledge, or at least the hope of finding knowledge, and here finding knowledge of God specifically, is continued in chapter 1 of the Proslogion, which is kind of a more poetic version of the introduction that he gives in the prologue. For instance, look at the second paragraph there. Come now, O Lord my God, teach my heart where and how to seek you, where and how to find you. Lord, if you are not here, where shall I seek you, since you are absent? But if you are everywhere, why do I not see you, since you are present? Truly you dwell in unapproachable light. And where is this unapproachable light? How am I to approach an unapproachable light? Who will lead me into it, so that I can see you in it? And by what signs am I to seek you? Under what aspect? I have never seen you, O Lord my God. I do not know your face. Again, almost begging for us to think of the problem of inquiry as it's discussed, especially in Plato's Meno and by the other authors. I mean, he's looking for something, but he's admitted that he doesn't know what it is. He knows what it is through faith, but this is a different sort of thing. That is, this is a philosophical inquiry, not anything supernatural, anything inspired by faith. This is a totally rational thing. And if he's starting from ignorance, about God, if God is this paradox, we believe that God is everywhere, yet he is absent. We believe that God is everything, but we can't see him. He's light, which is clarity and intelligibility, but he's unapproachable light. And that's sort of like saying it's our fault, and that is the traditional way of doing it, that God is infinite, we are finite. God is utterly intelligible in the sense that there's nothing confused about God. God is utterly clear, but because of our limited faculties, our finitude, maybe even our sinfulness, we can't grasp him. So, one wonders, how is Anselm going to look for God, or at least look for God, way to prove God's existence? It's not an easy thing. So in the next video, we'll take a look at his argument for the existence of God.